Miss Kakui, Mr. Saginaw, and Ms. Webstad. You can hear it in my voice. I think I'm nervous too. This is quite emotional for me. And I'm joining you here in my riding in Kitchener-Conestoga on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee and neutral people. So I'm honored to be here today. I have to say I'm newly elected, only a year, and I was doing my best to reach out to students in different schools, from high schools down to the grade schools. And when the pandemic hit, we couldn't, we kind of had to stop visiting, and it was one of the most treasured things that I did. And not that long ago, only in the fall, a school reached out to me. It was absolutely amazing. It was Forest Glen Public School. So Forest Glen Public School in Wilmot reached out to me, the students of Miss Teskey, Mr. Rumble, and Miss Klein-Chuck. They reached out to me and said, as an elected official, are you aware of Orange Shirt Day, and do you know about this, and how can we make a difference? And I was honored, and I joined them for a virtual meeting with 3 grade 7s, and I thanked them for taking the initiative to reach out to their elected official. And I said, I will see what I can do, and never, in my wildest dreams would realize that I'd be talking to Miss Webstad herself. So if I may ask you, Miss Webstad, what message can I bring back to those students who took the time to reach out? And hopefully there are many others across the country, especially, if education can help us bring awareness, and we can start with this younger generation, and they are naturally inclined to want to reach out and help. What message can you give to those young students who took the time and had the know-how to reach out to their elected officials about how they can make a difference?
It depends on the age of the children and the grade. My presentations differ from depending on what age group, but one thing that I always thank them for is for caring about what happened to us, and for learning the history, and for having empathy for our experiences. And children are amazing. They understand more than I would ever have given them credit for. So at that age, the younger age, they're just upset that somebody took my shirt, and how dare they take my shirt. And so they have the empathy. And as they grow older and into the high schools, that somebody said before, this wasn't 100 years ago, and all survivors aren't dead and gone. We're still here. When I would be introduced in school assemblies, when I did my across Canada tour last year, paid by Canadian Heritage, that I would be introduced as the real Phyllis Webstad. So to let them know that this was recent history, and that survivors are still here, and encourage them to know the land they're on. If there's survivors in the area, to ask them if they're okay to speak, and even their families. There are intergenerational impacts. So thank you for that question.
I will bring those suggestions back to them, and in this case with Forest Glen, they were grade 7, and I have to say, 3 classrooms in its virtual setting, and it was one of the most mature conversations I've ever had. It's I think a holiday like this will really cement the need to make these changes and to move forward. I very much appreciate it. Time for one more quick question. Maybe Miss Scott. We mentioned the balance between celebrating culture on National Day of Truth and Reconciliation with also that National Day of Mourning. And at the same time, you want to look back and recognize, but you also want to look forward. So what can we learn from you about that balance? How can we strike that very balance?
Well, I think it's been almost 5 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission closed its doors, and there's still a lot of work to be done towards reconciliation, and many calls to action that still need to be completed. When I talk about the balance, I think my mother-in-law was also taken to her first residential school at the age of 7. She wishes for a day to remember the students and their families' resiliency. She took a bad situation, being in residential school, and she turned it around. Recently, she completed her PhD, and she's in her 70s. So, I think much respect to her. she took back her power, and she wants all Canadians to know the assimilation policies did not kill her. And she speaks about that often. As an intergenerational survivor, I see this day as a time for my children and grandchildren to lay tobacco, pray, and remember all survivors and the parents that were left behind. And we must never forget the thousands of children that died or did not return from the schools. During the TRC, many, many survivors and the parents of former students spoke with children who went to school and never came home. It is unbelievable that some parents who passed on to the spirit world or are alive today do not know where their children are buried, sometimes even thousands of miles away. The NCTR will continue to find the truth of what happened to the children of residential schools through an exhaustive review of the residential school records that we hold in the archive. And I think it's important that we have places to gather and to come together and to respect, honor, and remember those who have gone before us, and for the future generations that they can learn.
I thank you. I thank you very much. I'd love to ask more questions. I want to give more people time. And I just wanted to add one quick thing, Mr. Saginaw. I wish I had time to talk to you, but I wasn't in the House of Commons. But when I heard you speak, it was one of the most emotional moments of my life. So thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Louis. Monsieur